Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed as an entrepreneur. What's up, successful dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Derek Magill. Derek is a college dropout, marketer, business strategist, career expert, and author. After dropping out of the University of Michigan during his sophomore year, Derek started a marketing company that went on to generate millions of dollars in business for his clients. He is currently the director of marketing at Praxis, which is a revolutionary 9-month intellectual and real-life education program geared towards young entrepreneurs, dropouts, and gap year students. He also just released his new book, How to Get Any Job You Want. So Derek, that's the intro I have for you, man. But tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Hey, thanks for that. I'm really excited to be here. I've been kind of reading up on your website, and I'm really excited about the podcast and what you're doing and your overall project. So
yes,
glad to be here. So I mean, you explained it pretty well. Like you said, I'm the director of marketing at Praxis. I've been with Praxis for about a little bit more than a year now. And Praxis, what it really is a 9-month apprenticeship program for 17 to 28-year-olds who want to get an apprenticeship at a startup and want to learn the ins and outs of both what their particular field is going to be, but also how to run a successful business. So we place people at a startup where they work for 6 months. There's a 3-month boot camp in the beginning of the program, and then they do 6 months of real-world work experience that they get paid a minimum of $15 an hour. And whether or not you have a degree, you end up leaving the program with a $40,000 per year minimum job offer. And right now, our average salary for a 21-year-old graduate of the program is $50,000 plus. We have a 98% employment rate. And most of the kids are kids without degrees. They're people who started off with very little skills and experiences. But following sort of an apprenticeship model and we found is a great way to get yourself in the door at a great company and to build a great career for yourself, whether or not you have permission or official certifications or official education levels or anything like that.
Now, is this a relatively newer organization?
I would say, yeah. I mean, we're still new, but we've been around for a couple years now, and we have had about 25 people go through the program, and we're basically going to be doubling this year. So by the end of this year, we'll have about 60 people, I would say, who have been through the program. And the goal after that is just double and double and double and continually scale up until we have thousands of people who are doing this. So yeah, I mean, we're still in the initial stages. We've made a lot of changes, but we've gotten to a point now where we've really refined the system. I think we've almost perfected it. As much as it can be perfected right now. And, we're having 17-year-olds in 3 to 4 months on the job before they even finish the program, getting offered full-time jobs by the companies at $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. Kids who are previously in high school, bored, upset with the standard menu of options that were being given to them, and who wanted to do something more.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, I was looking at the website here, and there's a section called Why Join Praxis, and I love what you guys say here, that it's about creating your own path instead of passively wandering down the well-worn path. And we're here to help you create the most direct path from where you are to where you want to be. Yeah,
and it's that really encapsulates our philosophy pretty nicely, and it's why I'm so excited to be involved in it. I think a lot of young people, they go through their early life, especially their early life, really just jumping through hoops. They're kind of on this conveyor belt towards this really poorly defined vision of success. And then they get there, they've been in school for 12 to 15 years and even more. They get there, they have a bunch of debt, and then they still don't know what they want to do with their lives. Or then they realize, like, crap, I could have gotten this at 17 or 18. I didn't need to do all the things that I did. I didn't need to go spend 4 years getting a degree I didn't care about. So Praxis evolved really as a way to help people in a situation like I was very early on in my life as well. And we exist to help people achieve their dreams much more quickly.
Oh my gosh, that's absolutely, man. And I can tell you from personal experience, my wife and I were both entrepreneurs. She now owns and operates a yoga studio and a juice bar here in town. And but she did 4 years of school, got her bachelor's degree, but ultimately a degree that she is never going to use.
Yep.
Towards the end of her education, we launched the business, and she discovered that that's really where her passion lies, and that's how she makes her living now. And so we're just starting to pay off, $80,000 plus worth of debt that essentially, she's never going to use.
Yeah, it's great that she's doing it, and I think a lot of people, though, they go to college, they get a degree, and then they kind of feel obligated to stick in that career path. So like you get a law degree and then you realize, oh my gosh, I really don't want to do law, but then they stick with it anyways because it's like everybody thought that I was going to be doing this. It's going to disappoint them if I suddenly, don't do this. So in many ways, like we found, and I found with people that I know who are graduating now, having a degree to your name with a specific career field can almost limit your mindset. Like it can limit the way you think about your options because you feel like you're obligated or you're required to go try something else that you really don't want to do, but you've put in the time and the energy. So it's like, I have to do it anyway.
What, in your opinion, what kind of student would you suggest to drop out and to join a program like Praxis versus, what kind of student would you say, you should probably stay in school? Because, at Successful Dropout anyways, I work hard to, I want to encourage people that feel the call of entrepreneurship, that feel, aren't happy, in the system to drop out and pursue, create their own path. And that's what Successful Dropout is here for. But just as hard, I try and encourage the people that should stay in school to stay in school. And so, because school, there's a lot wrong with the educational system and stuff like that, but there's also a lot right with it. There's a lot of value to be gained there, and dropping out is definitely not right for everyone. And so I'd be curious to hear, in your opinion, I guess what kind of person should drop out and become an entrepreneur or pursue something like Praxis, and what kind of person should stay in school?
So I would say college is definitely valuable. I mean, I got some value out of it. I don't know anybody who says like they didn't get any value out of it whatsoever. There's always something you get out of it. The question is it worth the cost, and is it valuable in comparison to what alternatives? So a general principle I use for evaluating this situation is will dropping out of college, will doing something different than the traditional education system, will it help you be happier and more successful than if you had stayed in school? And regardless of what you end up doing, if that's ultimately the answer, I would say yes, you should drop out of school. I'm generally a fan of the apprenticeship model for almost every career path. There are a couple of them that you can't really do right now. Medicine, law, physical therapy, or something that is difficult. You can get internships and you can get apprenticeship opportunities, but you ultimately need that certification. So if you're following a career where you absolutely need that certification, then in my opinion, that's really the only reason to be in school. I think pretty much everything else can be learned on the job, can be learned through experience, and can be learned much more quickly and much more cheaply that way than if you go through 4 to 5 years of schooling. I think one of the things that a lot of people miss out on their evaluation of schooling is that there are also a lot of bad habits that can be picked up in college. There's a lot of bad mindsets that can be picked up in college. I had experience with this. I think most people I met have experience with this. Things like, just procrastination, laziness, doing the bare minimum to succeed. Those are things that are sort of indoctrinated in college, in my experience. They're things that, you can get by creating something that essentially creates no market value. You write an essay, the only person who's ever going to read it is a professor. Versus if you're creating something in the real world, like you actually have real feedback. You have potentially people from all over the world, all different kinds of backgrounds, all different kinds of experiences, looking at what you're creating. And I think you get much better feedback that way. And so starting that early on, I would say is more valuable than going to school. that's just my opinion. I know, there are other people who say that college is, that it has some merit still, and there's certainly things you can get out of it, but ultimately I would say, yeah.
Now that seems to be kind of, I guess, a lot of what I would feel like the why behind Praxis would be, or the hole that they fill, is that maybe somebody who is, because I remember being that age in college, and it's tough to know. There's so many different options, and if there's anybody like me listening, there was never really one thing that I wanted to do or be my whole life. I never felt passionately kind of driven towards one path. There was always like 3 or 4 that I was like, well, that would be cool. That would also be cool. And so Praxis seems like a great way to, for 9 months to get out there into the real world, get some internship opportunities, get paid while you're doing it, and try some stuff out. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, I've found that I have learned so much more about myself in 2 years of work experience and in 2 years of being outside of the education system than I ever did in school. School, you have sort of a preset curriculum and a preset syllabus that you have to follow. You're sort of incentivized to follow, certain steps so that you can pass the classes, pass the tests. And I think, people often say school is a great place to learn about yourself. But honestly, I think the incentives that exist inside school and the structures that exist in college in particular make it a very difficult place to actually really explore your options. I mean, when I was in school, I had no idea that I could ever work for something like Praxis. When you're in school and you're learning marketing, you don't really think about all the different options that you can have as a career in marketing. And you really don't get to see those things until you actually start working. One of the ways that Praxis in particular helps people accomplish this is, you get the work experience, which is tremendously valuable, but we also have an education component to the program where people are exploring all sorts of other fields. They're building and creating all sorts of other projects. We had one kid, for example, named Ryan Ferguson, who launched a podcast called the World Wonders podcast because he was really interested in low budget travel, and ultimately he wants to build a career out of that. So the program is really designed to help you both get work experience, but also it's designed for what we call the Renaissance person. Really, it's designed for someone who wants to have their hands in many different things, wants to explore all their options, and wants to be someone who is not a single career, single track kind of person. So, absolutely.
Now, you recently wrote a post here on the Praxis website, and it's called "Recently Graduated and Jobless: 4 Mistakes You Might Have Made." And I'd love you to talk a little bit about that. I see, the first mistake here that you mentioned is you might have developed a horizontal network. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so there's this another myth about college. There's this myth about college that it's a great place for networking. People always say, join a fraternity because it's a great thing for networking.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's partly true. I've had some opportunities because of my time in school. I've certainly met some interesting people. But what I will say is that a lot of times what ends up happening is you develop a social network and a professional network of people who are exactly at your level in life. So they've had no other experiences than you. They've had the same education level. They have the same job experience. They're the same age roughly. And then, those kind of people, they can only help you so much. Whereas once you get into the workplace and you start developing what we call a vertical network, is you start developing a network of, let's say you'll have a CEO here, you'll have another CEO there, then you'll have a mid-level management person, you'll have someone who is above you who has, maybe 10 years your senior, who has done a lot of really cool things. You start to develop a network of very diverse people at different stages in their lives. And they can be inspiring to you. They can give you advice. They can help provide you with opportunities that someone who is at your same level would never be able to do. And it's unfortunate that a lot of kids graduate with a network, like I said, of essentially of peers, of people who really don't have a lot of professional value to offer you. And I found ever since I left school, the opportunities I've had, almost every single opportunity I've had has been through people I've met who have already done what I wanted to do. And those are things that I could only really acquire through on-the-job work and really just pursuing interests outside of school.
So the second point that I see here in this article, one of the mistakes that they might have made is that they spent more time padding a resume than actually creating value propositions. And that really intrigues me. Can you speak some to that?
Yeah, so a lot of people, and I fell into this certainly as well, but I think a lot of people when they're in school, the incentives exist for them to worry about things like grades, worry about like awards and merit badges and accolades and approval from professors and getting like a check mark next to your name that said you've done this. I think, that stuff can be helpful, certainly, but nothing really compares to real world value creation and like a history of proven value creation in the real marketplace. And how this relates to college kids is a lot of college kids, they'll graduate school and all they have is that piece of paper that says they got some A's in some classes, they got an award here, they were on the dean's list, and then they submit it to a company to get a job or whatever, and suddenly like they've essentially commoditized themselves because everybody else has a similar story to them. One of the things I wrote about in my book is something called a value proposition. And what a value proposition is essentially a way for you to distinguish yourself when you're applying for a job. So rather than submitting a resume, submit a document that gives a couple different points about how you can create value for that company. Tell them like, here's a social media strategy for them. Noah Kagan, for example, the director of marketing for Mint, and founder of AppSumo, the way he got hired by Mint was by telling Mint up front, giving them a marketing plan for his first 90 days on the job. The way I got hired by Praxis was something very similar. I just sent an email out to them. I didn't attach a resume, didn't attach my GPA or any degrees or anything like that. And I told them, look, here's some problems that I see with your current marketing. Here's how I could fix them. And I'll do them for free. So it was a really huge value proposition for them because it was essentially no downside, and they're getting someone who's actually spent the time to dissect what their business does and to offer some valuable insights into what they could do instead.
Man, I'm just thinking as somebody, as an employer myself, if we receive a lot of resumes for some of our businesses and stuff. And if I were to receive a value proposition like that, that would just make the world a difference. Now that you're talking about that. Oh,
and as someone who has reviewed resumes myself as well and reviewed job applications, you start to realize how low the bar really is. Like a lot of the job applications you'll see poor grammar, poor spelling, but just nothing stands out at all from one person to the next. Mm-hmm. And so if you can be that person who just takes an extra step and just don't rely on the employer or whoever you're really trying to work with. Don't rely on them to just see something valuable in you. Go out and tell them very quantifiable, tangible things that you can bring to the table. The most common thing that I see with kids is they'll say, I'll ask them, what's valuable about you? And their response will be something like, well, I'm a lifelong learner. I'm really passionate. Like that is a very nebulous, indefinite way to go about describing yourself. Really give yourself, do some research, take some time to really understand what that company does, and then write down some points about you, how you can create value. It's just such an easier way. And I guarantee you do not need a degree to get a job if you go about it that way. Companies will line up to hire you if you're able to do that.
Wow, there is so much value here. Successful dropouts. Derek, I can already tell that this is going to be, it's going to be one of my favorite episodes so far. I feel like this transitions well into your book, which is called How to Get Any Job You Want. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Is it a recent publication? Did you just publish it?
Yeah, so it's just on, right now it's just available on my website. It's free for download. I'm currently working on like an expanded edition with a lot of updated content, which I will be publishing on Amazon. And it is new. It's been around for, I would say, the last month and a half or so. It's been downloaded a couple thousand times so far. Wow. And we've already had some really cool case studies. I had a kid reach out to me the other day who told me that he used the essay in there on value propositions and on free work, which is another thing I recommend, offering, and I'll go into that. But he used those essays and he was able to go get himself an apprenticeship at a company. He said the company was like totally blown away by what he did. And he actually sent me his document, and it was like a 2-page Word PDF where he really just outlines like a complete social media strategy for that company that they didn't have in place currently. And they hired him. And he is 19 years old. He has no college degree. And he's just, now he's really, really pumped on life. And, I guarantee that if he spends 6 months at that company and develops a proven record of creating value, that he's going to be able to go anywhere else he wants, and no one's ever going to ask him about his degree. So that was, that's a really fun story from the book. The book is really designed to help you make your degree status irrelevant. So whether you have a degree or whether you don't have a degree, the steps and strategies in the book will help you land essentially really any job that you want. And it's designed to help you get yourself in the door through non-traditional means, sidestep the traditional bureaucracies that exist, and build a meaningful career for yourself. So whether you're 17 years old or whether you're 25 years old and you have a college degree, I think a lot of the content in there is highly relevant and highly actionable.
So you got to promise me something. You got to make sure and let us know where to find that book by the end of this episode, all right?
Absolutely.
So Derek, here at Successful Dropout, we help young college-age students go from leaving school early, if that's what they feel called to do, to becoming successful entrepreneurs. And the first step there is the scary decision of whether or not to leave school. So I know you dropped out during your sophomore year. I'd love you to tell us the story and kind of the why behind, your dropout experience.
Yeah. So I was kind of a unique case, I think. I think a lot of kids who drop out, they end up realizing that they are kind of bored in school while they're in college. I think I always sort of knew it. Even back in middle school, I was never a fan of school. Even though I was, an A student, I always did really, really well. I had a big course load because I wanted to try to challenge myself. But I never really felt the kind of excitement that I feel now when I'm working. I never felt that in school. And so, I remember even back in high school telling my mom I wasn't going to go to college, and her being kind of flabbergasted and telling me that I need to go to college, blah, blah, I need to try it out. I'm going to really break her heart if I don't go to school. And, I ended up just going to school to try it out. I went to the University of Michigan. And I knew kind of right off the bat that I wasn't there for a career. I was there for what I hoped would be an intellectual experience. And so I was studying Latin and ancient Greek. I'm a really big fan of like classics and classical studies. So I was studying that, and I noticed very quickly that it wasn't the intellectual environment that I had hoped for. I was getting a lot more value out of attending conferences, for example, networking with people online, asking questions, watching videos, listening to podcasts and stuff like that. And then I ended up actually traveling to Rome and studying Latin there for about a month or so. And I realized like all the things that I love about that, I'm getting outside of the college experience. What I'm getting from the college experience is a bunch of money that I'm spending. I have a bunch of kids in my classes who don't particularly care about the subjects that I'm interested in. And I'm not, very happy here. So that was, I guess, the beginning of it. Now it ended up taking me another year or so to finally make the move. And one of the things that kind of pushed me over the edge was I had already started doing some work. I was working with my club, doing some marketing for them. I was designing t-shirts online and selling those. And I think the moment you make your first sale and the moment you like do something in the marketplace, your mindset starts to shift, and suddenly it becomes addicting. Right. And I realized very quickly that college was a barrier to me pursuing the things that I really wanted to do. And so I ended up skipping my finals, quit, and I guess I was kicked out of school technically because I skipped my finals, but I never went back, and I haven't regretted it. Life's been essentially a fairy tale ever since in many ways.
Now, when you dropped out, can you go briefly into how your parents reacted to this?
Yeah, so I'm pretty lucky in that my parents, both of them, they hadn't graduated college either, and they've been able to build a successful business without a degree.
So they're business owners too?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And my father has built a tremendously successful business, has over 100 employees,
wow.
Has built quite a name for himself. And I was lucky to have him as sort of a guiding model of a successful person, because I think a lot of times people, like when they think of college dropouts, they think you're either a homeless loser or you're like Steve Jobs.
Yeah, there's no happy medium.
There's no happy medium. And like I said earlier, the reality is all you need to be is happier and more successful than you would be if you stayed. And my father was a great example of that. He's an example of a guy who had nothing at the age of 19, but built a really successful business over the course of 20 years or so. And, seeing that, I think, was certainly helpful in my decision. And it also made it so that they didn't take the decision as harshly as, some other parents might. Now, they certainly didn't want me to leave, right. But, I think ultimately they realized that there wasn't anything that they could do to convince me otherwise. And so there was some strain on their relationship at the beginning, but once they realized that I was doing some cool stuff and that I actually had, some goals that I was achieving outside of school, they really quickly turned around. Now, the response from other people was a little bit different. I remember, telling my guidance counselor that I was going to drop out, and she looked at me like a cow stares at an oncoming train. It was just like blank face. And then she leaned in real closely and she touched my leg and said, Derek, I think you're depressed. And it was funny because I had just told her all of the things that I wanted to do and like how excited I was about life, like all of my travel goals and all of my business goals. Like it was a really animated conversation, But it was not the response of somebody who didn't hear me. It was the response of someone who was incapable of understanding life outside of academia. Outside of like collegiate achievement. So that was certainly a fun experience. Friends was sort of a mixed bag. I had a lot of college friends who thought it was really cool and would say things like, I wish I could do what you did, Derek. I want to do it, but I just can't because of this. They give themselves every excuse in the world they couldn't do it. High school friends, it was funny. I remember a lot of them just hearing through other friends, kind of vicariously through them, telling me that a lot of people were looked at it as like, oh, I'm glad like Derek dropped out. Like I always knew he was going to fail or something silly like that. Sort of like disaster porn almost.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a fun experience. I think now that I've had the opportunity over the last 2 years to really build a life for myself, they see things differently. But in the beginning, there was, I would say there were certainly some people who were glad to see what they thought, what they perceived as a failure on my part.
Do you feel like that fueled you at all?
Yeah, I mean, in a little bit. I've never been super motivated by other people, but I mean, there's certainly sometimes there was that thought that, I'm going to go do what I want to do. I'm going to go build a really successful business and life for myself. And, they're going to look at me later on and they're going to see that they were wrong. And that was certainly there, but it wasn't a primary motivator.
Right. What advice could you give our listeners on how to best approach this with friends and family if they're not feeling the support?
Yeah, so I'm going to just give them the really kind of cold, harsh advice is to just learn to say no anyways. Because you're really going to have to do that regardless one day. So whether you're 18, 19, 20 years old, or whether you're 25, 30, you're going to have to learn to upset certain people in your life that you care about. There's just no other way to live. And so the best way to do it is to get started now. Just learn that lesson the hard way now, rather than waiting till you're 25 or 30. Because if you establish that kind of relationship with the people in your life who you love, I think they'll take it less harshly the next time it happens, and the next time it happens, they'll be able to deal with it much better. Two is like, look, your parents are going to respect you long term more if you live your life according to your values, not theirs. Like there may be, some time, a couple months, maybe to a year where they're upset with your decision. But if you can go out and prove that, like I said, you're happier and more successful, that's all your parents really want. Typically, they want you to be happy and successful. And so if you can do that, typically I've seen relationships get mended pretty quickly. If that doesn't help, one other practical way to go about it, and something that I've recommended pretty regularly to people, is just offer to take a gap year. So tell your parents you're taking a year off just to try life outside of school and do some different stuff. There's absolutely no reason really that you need to spend your whole life in school in a straight, sort of conveyor belt process. Like it's fine to take a break. And I think a lot of parents will respond positively to that if you're able to give them a couple, points of action that you want to take during that gap year. And then once that gap year is over, you can look back and say, hey, look, here's all the things that I did outside of school. Here's why I don't want to go back now. And I think maybe, you'll have proven to them that you can succeed outside of school without going through all the potential negatives of telling them you're just quitting altogether.
Good word. I'd love to talk a little bit about what the first few, 3 to 6 months were like after you dropped out, because I really believe that's a really crucial time. And a lot of our listeners, they've told me, that's one of the scariest times is when you've actually kind of made that hurdle and you've decided to, be true to yourself, drop out. You've talked to your friends, family, all that stuff. Now what? You're out in the real world, and those first several months are crucial. So I'd love to hear what you did.
Yeah. So first, my girlfriend broke up with me.
Oh gosh. Off to a great start.
Yeah. My girlfriend broke up with me, There was
did it have anything to do with the dropout experience, or
I would say
completely unrelated? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's fine. Ultimately, you have to live, for yourself and live in accordance with your values. And ours just didn't align very well. So that was, actually a good learning experience. But I would say there's something that we refer to at Praxis called like a deschooling phase, which is, you drop out or you quit school, or it really just happens even when you graduate. And suddenly you're out in the real world and there's no curriculum, there's no syllabus, there's no structures necessarily to help you determine what you want to do, to help you determine how to go get it, and to give you, to tell you what is a successful action. So in school, it's very clear. It's like, just go get a good grade on your test.
Yeah.
When you're outside of that, it's like, what do I do now? Like, how do I get feedback? How do I go about achieving things? How do I know something is successful and something's not successful? How do I evaluate my own work? How do I get started building a career for myself when I have no idea what I really want to do? So I went through all of those phases, certainly. And really, I was fortunate. I was able to go work for my father for a couple months. And this is not something that he was really willing to do. They told me to go get a job. And I had no idea where to get started. And so I actually came back to them and I told them, here's some things that I'll do for you. And here's some things that I can do. And, let me come work for you. And if it works out, then you can start paying me, whatever you think is fair. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. And so they actually let me come in and work on an eBay and Amazon store for them, which in about 3 months, I was able to grow the eBay store to $30,000 a month in revenue, just through managing products and testing different like headlines for the products and product images and stuff like that. And that was a tremendously valuable experience for me. And I think it gave me the confidence after that to go start trying things more outside of his business. And so I started making t-shirts. I got some clients for building Instagram and Facebook accounts. I started doing that a lot. And that's the first 6 months or so was just, I kind of just focused on work, to be honest. After I got some initial experience, I just focused on getting clients. I would offer to work for free a lot. And that was a great way to get myself in the door. I would tell them, I'll work for free for a month and then you can pay me after that. And that got me some cool gigs ranging from craft brewery marketing, helping them do some stuff, to working with commercial real estate companies.
Yeah, and that transitions well into talking more about your entrepreneurship journey. And so you started a marketing company, and I remember in one of your emails to me, you sent me a picture of an ad that it looked like went pretty viral. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was an ad for the company called Undertech, which does concealed carry clothing, actually, for military, police, even everyday citizen. It does concealed carry, both firearms, but also like pepper spray, credit cards. It's really just it's like an Under Armour shirt, but it has concealed pockets in it. And I was tasked with creating an ad. And the process was pretty simple. I didn't have a budget, and so I just kind of went onto Instagram and looked for models who I thought would be a good fit for it. And then I sent them the product and would have them take a photo with their cell phone and send it back to me. We created a really easy graphic, and then did a targeted ad to women on Facebook who we thought would be interested in the product based off of some different demographics that we selected. And it blew up. I mean, it ended up doing in a year over $1 million in direct trackable sales through Facebook. It actually ended up doing more than that, I know, and it was shared almost 300,000 times. It's still getting commented on today. Like basically, I would say there's probably 10 to 20 comments every hour or so.
Kidding me. That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's been over a year now since the ad, about a year and a half since the ad was created. And so by now it's probably done about $2.5 million in sales. And it expanded their Facebook presence from 2,000 followers to almost, I guess it's about 200,000 now. And it has literally, took their business from December 2014 to December 2015 was a 575% increase from that one ad.
Wow.
So that was a really lucky win for me. And it obviously was very financially lucrative. And it ended up really allowing me to take that and then go pitch myself to really any other client that I wanted to work with. And this goes back to sort of value proposition is like, when I apply for work, when I go find clients, which I don't do that regularly anymore because I'm working with Praxis primarily, but I did, when I wanted to go out and get something and really sell myself, I didn't need to submit a resume at all. Nobody cared whether I had a degree. No one ever asked. All I needed to do was tell them the work that I created and the numbers that I've done, and people would line up to work with me. And so, again, like I guess that was very enlightening to me, because I realized pretty quickly that the only thing that really matters is the quality of your work and the things that you created for other people.
Yeah, well, and just taking action in the beginning, just doing the work, making the mistakes. I'm sure you made some mistakes and had a lot of success too before even that ad. But the fact that you just put yourself out there, you worked for free for a while in order to gain certain clients, and that, led you to this major success you had, which then launched you to just another level.
And I'll say too, none of the things that I did in my work. So I was doing marketing, but it ended up expanding to things like business development, business strategy, e-commerce, website design, graphic design, video production, photography. Like I did like all of those things. I ended up like doing loan underwriting for a commercial real estate company, or international commercial real estate company, in part because I was designing some marketing packages for them. And none of the jobs that I got, none of the clients that I hired or was hired by, I had almost no experience really when I first got started in any of those fields. So like if I wanted to do like a business development project, or if I wanted to do a design project, typically like I really didn't know how to go about getting started, but I would just sell myself anyway and get them to kind of like get myself in the door, show them some past work that I've done in another area like marketing. And then I just learn on the job. So like, one good example of this is I was working with a company who wanted me to do some email marketing for them and design some email campaigns. And I had no experience whatsoever with email marketing, but I was able to use my Facebook skills and the past results with that to get myself in the door. And then I really had to go about learning how to do email marketing. I think a lot of people, the way they go about it is they think they need to go to school, or they think they need to study up a bunch before they can get started. The reality is like learning on the job, I think, is the best way to do it. And you really don't need a whole lot of skills or experiences to get started. I was able to learn email marketing essentially just by reverse engineering the email funnels from all sorts of different products and individuals that I liked. And so I would just go sign up for their email lists, see every single email they sent me, and then reverse engineer it for that company. And it worked really, really well.
Yeah, it reminds me of, launching Successful Dropout, and also, a couple other online ventures I did before that. I'm also a college dropout. I didn't have any formal experience with really anything online. Actually, I was dark on social media up until like two years ago now, as of recording this. And learning on the job, I think, is one of the most efficient ways to, obviously gain experience, but just gain knowledge about any particular subject. Because, really, you come to a problem, something that needs to be done. You Google it, you YouTube it, you learn how to solve that problem, and now you've taken the next step. And I guess I love the efficiency of it, because it eliminates any kind of unnecessary learning for learning something that you don't need to learn, right? Because you don't need to apply it to anything that you're doing. And so you're only learning what you need to take a step forward, or, in more of the broad scheme of things, to design the business or the kind of lifestyle that you want for yourself. So
yeah, and there's two other things to it as well. I would say one, it's more urgent. There's like, when there's money on the line, things start to change.
Yeah.
But two, like what's really interesting is that I found it was more fulfilling, because you're getting market feedback from the learning that you're doing. Whereas in school, like, you learn, you maybe pass a test, but that's not the same thing as helping someone go sell a product to, hundreds of thousands of people, for example. And so when you're learning something and you see really quickly, it's like, oh my gosh, the things that I learned helped this company grow by X percentage. That's just like a great feeling. And it's a motivator for learning more things. I remember, I had a chance to go work for this commercial real estate company, and they had reached out to me to ask me about doing some marketing packages, and they needed someone who knew Adobe InDesign. So I had no idea how to do Adobe InDesign, but I essentially told them I did. And then over the next couple days before getting started, did everything I could to learn how to do it. And then by the time we got started, I knew how to do it. Whereas like, I think again, like what school teaches you is to go about things the complete opposite way. It's to like learn. And then you finally have the authority to create. Mm-hmm. What I say and what we do at Praxis is create, learn, create, learn, create. Like, make your learning a creative process, and it's going to be much more fulfilling. It's going to be much more motivating, and you're going to learn a lot more quickly.
It's such good stuff, man. So good. So, Derek, I want to talk about your worst entrepreneurial moment, and I want you to really tell us that story.
Well, this actually ties into what I was just talking about, because it can get you in trouble if you oversell yourself. I'm trying to think if this is the absolute worst one. I would say, I think so. I mean, everybody who does stuff, like, there's always moments. I've been pretty fortunate that, like, nothing has been like game ending almost, which, again, I think one of the things you realize too when you kind of get out of school is that failure is actually not that scary. I think failure is highly overrated, but it's at the same time, it's like, it's not really that scary. Like, what's the worst thing that happens? Not a whole lot. I mean, and so for me, I mean, one instance would be with this email marketing thing. You know, I got hired by them, and the first couple campaigns I put together were garbage. They did not work at all, and they were pretty upset with me, and to the point where they were going to fire me. But I had fortunately convinced them to pay me up front for a month, and so I had a little bit more time to go, and I essentially kind of told them a white lie about just that I was going to change things and stuff like that. And this was all part of the process of getting the feel for their company. Reality is I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, crap, I'm at the point now where I'm stealing from these guys because I'm not doing good work for them. And so that's when I sort of realized I needed to go about the process of starting to reverse engineer what other people did. And that's how I learned email marketing in basically a week, and was able to very quickly turn around the success of my campaigns for them. But I mean, that fear was certainly probably one of the worst times. I mean, just waking up and having an email of them really complaining to me, that was the first time I had dealt with that, and I had no idea how to handle it. So, I mean, honestly, I would say that's certainly one of the worst things. I mean, running the eBay store was another one. I mean, just the constant issues with customer service. And then when I got out of that, I ended up doing, for a little while, I ended up building standing desks that I would actually make in my apartment with a friend of mine, and we would sell them on eBay as well. And I remember another really terrible moment being when we finally got this big order. We actually got an order from a professor at MIT, and it was through eBay. We had like 5 desks, and which is huge for us, and it was a decent amount of money. And then we realized that the manufacturer for the legs we were using had discontinued the legs.
Oh, goodness.
And, we had basically a day or two to ship the product. We had to pack it and ship it, and we had to go source other legs. And so we ended up going to IKEA and finding some comparable legs, and then asking the person if we could send them those. And we ended up kind of saying, well, this is an upgrade, essentially, and we'll give it to you
Yeah.
for the same price. And it actually, I mean, in many ways, it was an upgrade. The problem was it cost us like way more to get those legs, and so it ended up eating into our margin significantly. And so by the time it was all done, we were probably making $5 to $10 an hour each, putting those desks together. Right. And that was terrible. If you've ever packed a big desk and tried to ship it, ship a 150-pound package, it's pretty awful.
I bet.
And then it gets worse, because then the packages get there, and UPS had beaten them to hell. We didn't pack them in the proper boxes because we had no idea what we were doing. And so all the boxes were just destroyed. I mean, part of me thinks like the UPS must have dragged them behind the truck, something like that, because they were just absolutely trashed, and the customer was really upset. So we had to go deal with that. I mean, again, they're not like earth-shattering things, but there's certainly things that really caused some dismay at the time. And then I look back at them now, and I think they're pretty funny, and I've certainly learned a lot from them.
If you could time travel back to day one of your entrepreneurial journey and have 10 minutes with your former self to communicate any lessons you've acquired with the intention of saving yourself mistakes and heartache, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, just get started. So you've wasted so much time already. The product doesn't need to be perfect. The thing you're creating doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to essentially plan every step of the way. Just get started on one thing. And, even though you have a ton of different variant interests, just get started. Don't waste time thinking about every little thing that you could do instead, or every little thing that could go wrong, or every little way that you could improve the product. Just ship something. So, like, one of the things that I've had, for example, was like my blog. Getting started on that was like a huge stress to me. It was like, and it's ended up being like the single most valuable thing that I've done in my career, writing and creating stuff on things like Quora and stuff like that. I mean, that's how you found me.
Right. Yep.
And that's how I've had really a lot of great personal and professional opportunities. But it took me so long to like really feel comfortable doing it because it was like, oh, my design's not right. It doesn't look great. I'd look at like Tim Ferriss's website, or I'd look at like, I don't know, Chris Guillebeau or I don't know, Ramit Sethi, and I'd look at their sites and be like, oh, these are beautiful websites. I need to have a website just like this before I can get started. The reality is like you don't. And, the way I was able to sort of overcome that was through looking at screenshots of their old websites, like before they were as big as they are now, but while they were still getting successful. Like if you look at Tim Ferriss's old website, it is awful.
Oh, I remember it. Yeah, it was terrible.
Awful. And then like Ramit Sethi is the same way. Like Noah Kagan, for example, who's kind of certainly been inspirational to me in certain ways. I remember looking at his old blog posts because like I would see some of the new stuff and be like, oh, this is great. Like I want to be able to like write like this. And I was struggling getting there. And it was like nothing that I wrote was something that I found that I was proud of. And then I would look at his old stuff and it's just horrible. It's horrendous. You look at like his first couple blog posts and they are just terrible. Not just like, I don't just mean like the content. I mean, literally like the formatting and the grammar is just awful. Like you would read this and be like, who the hell is this guy? But then you realize like this is all the process that he took to getting to where he is now. Like you learn by creating, you learn by getting real world market feedback. You don't learn by sitting around analyzing everything yourself. You have to put stuff out into the world. And so just seeing that stuff was a big motivator for me because it was like, okay, look, now I can see myself rather than trying to be 40 before I'm 40, I can see myself on this journey towards success and I can see all the steps that they took to get there. All the like mistakes that they made. I mean, even just going back through Tim Ferriss's old post, you can see all the like, mistakes that they made along the way, all the lower quality stuff that they produced. And then you realize like it's okay to do that. It's fine. That's part of the process. And for me, like that was something that really helped me kind of gain, I guess, the courage to get started.
Yeah, man. I mean, I am a perfectionist, and not only that, but I tend to overthink things.
Yeah.
If I don't watch myself, I'll think something to death instead of acting on it. And so one thing I forget where this quote is from, but it always rattles around in my head when I'm on the verge of starting something. And it says, if you've waited to start something until it's perfect, then you've started too late.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. And that's, I mean, it takes a while to learn that. I mean, it took me months, but going back, I would just say, Derek, do it now. Don't wait.
What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I think, well, first off, I'll give you one that I wish I did more that I know contributes to my success when I do it is just getting proper sleep. That is like something that I think when you're in school in particular, like you just read about the studies. I mean, college kids are chronically undersleeping. And I picked that up in school, this like habit of never sleeping or not getting enough sleep or not getting enough consistent sleep. And I find like when I'm able to kind of regulate my sleep schedule more, I just am so much more productive, so much happier, and things just tend to go much more smoothly. Things that I've gotten into recently are things like cold showers and cryotherapy, which I found like starting my day by like jumping into a cold shower or going down to the cryotherapy place where they gas you with, nitrogen that is negative 110 degrees Celsius. It's just such a wake up and such a great feeling to start your day with. So that's been huge. I notice a noticeable difference when I do those kind of things.
Yeah, I've tried that cold shower thing a couple times. Just recently been doing it a bit more, and that'll wake you up. It gets the blood flowing. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, and I like to think of it as like a small habit. Like there's a good book, The Power of Habit, and I think one of the things it talks about is like cornerstone habits, like having a habit that is small enough barrier to entry that you can do every day no matter what. And that sort of sets a foundation for everything else. Yeah. So that's one. I try to write every day, which is another one. So whether it's on Quora, my personal blog, or whether it's just on Evernote or some other, or like, Google Docs, I try to write something every day, minimum of like 500 words. I think that is like really helpful. And that just, it clears my mind, clears sort of the junk out, and gets me in the habit of creating stuff regularly.
What do you consider success to be as an entrepreneur? Because everybody's got their own idea of success. It's more of a relative term, right? So for you personally, what is success to you?
Really, it's just the achievement of my values in all areas of my life. So I don't really create a distinction or a dichotomy between business and personal life. That's just me. Like everything is kind of tied together pretty neatly. And so for me, like it really is just the achievement of the things that I've set for the goals that I've set for myself in accordance with the values that I maintain. It doesn't really get much more complicated than that. Whether you can get really specific in my particular case, but I think as like a guiding principle, living according to your values.
Yeah, and I love what you said there, because there's as an entrepreneur, I see two different mindsets in entrepreneurs. There's the mindset that you build this business, and one mindset is you either build your life around your business, and then the other mindset is, which I personally strive for, and it sounds like you do too, is to build your business around your life, pretty much your business around your ideal lifestyle that you want, or for what you were saying, to have the two kind of neatly tied together, where you never feel like you're going to work, right?
Exactly.
Or you never like, oh, I can't wait till Friday evening, or I can't wait till the weekend, because like case in point, tomorrow I'm taking off for 3 days to do some backpacking, and that's the decision I made yesterday. And then I'm gonna work. I'll probably work Saturday and Sunday. But the idea that I'm taking off on quote unquote a work day, and then I'm going to work on a weekend, I just don't think like that anymore. I used to, but not anymore.
Exactly. And that's actually, to talk about Praxis again, that's one of the cool things about the guys I work with at Praxis, our team, is you will always find someone working at pretty much all hours of the day, any day of the week. I'll oftentimes, take part of the day off and then go work at night, or vice versa, and they'll do that same thing. And I think that's neat. And I think that's kind of a function of having business be a core part of your life, and building your life around your business. I mean, I was in Tokyo recently, and I did some sales calls while I was in Tokyo, and that was fine. I actually needed that. I actually craved a little bit of work while I was there, while I was essentially just there to have fun. So that's a huge component of what I think is a successful life as an entrepreneur.
What is a quality that you have that you would consider essential to being an entrepreneur?
I think I am sort of a jack of all trades. And I think that is a really essential skill. I think specialization is overrated. And I've been pretty successful in a lot of different areas of business because I've been able to be adaptable. And, I recognize that I don't need to be the best at what I'm doing. I either need to find the best people, or I just need to be the first person to go to market with it. And if you keep that mindset, I think that's huge. I think a lot of people, they go to school and their only idea of an entrepreneur is someone who's really good at coding. But I think you can be tremendously successful having just a wide range of skills with just enough knowledge to be able to ask the right questions. I think is huge. And so when I have an issue, I'm very good at researching a solution or finding a solution really, really quickly. Whereas if you over specialize, then you suddenly you come to a new area of business and you just have no idea where to get started.
What's a book that you would recommend to us, and why?
So my favorite book, I mean, I can give you a couple, but my favorite book, I think, and one of the ones that has certainly been most influential on me, it's not a nonfiction book. It's The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, is one of my absolute favorite books. It's actually about a college dropout.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's about a guy who drops out of school because it is not in accordance with his values and the things that he wants to achieve for himself, and goes out to build a life for himself. And it's in architecture, but I think it could really apply to a ton of different fields. And, it's about living in accordance with your values, regardless of what people might think or what people might say during that process. And showing you that if you do that and you can do that consistently, success will come your way, and you will build a happy life for yourself. And so I think that's a great book. It's, like I said, it's one of my favorites. For nonfiction, I mean, The End of Jobs by Taylor Pearson is a great book. I think that's a really great book for sort of getting in the mindset of sort of the future of work. 4 Hour Work Week was obviously, I've mentioned Tim Ferriss before, that was really hugely influential. I would say those 3 for entrepreneurship. For dropping out, The Education of Millionaires by Michael Ellsberg is a great book, and so is The Last Safe Investment by Michael Ellsberg as well. Both of those books, I think, are excellent, and those 5 books overall, I think, would be a great start.
What's an internet resource like Evernote that you would recommend?
So I use Evernote. I use Google Calendar. I've sort of recently gotten into being a bit more organized. You mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned on the episode, but you mentioned earlier at least systems. That you're kind of a systems guy, and
yeah,
I have had to learn how to do that since I left. I am not naturally a systems person at all. I am sort of a put out fires kind of guy, which is like get started, create a huge mess, and then fix it. And it can work in the short term. It's just not very scalable, and it doesn't necessarily make you very happy or happy. So that has been something like just using Google Calendar regularly has been huge for me. And I would recommend essentially everybody to start sort of at a bare minimum scheduling out core events. But I think the more you can plan stuff, the better. And if you have it like there, so it's just automatically set to remind you, that can just be huge. Other ones, I mean, I don't know if this is so much a resource, but just like a mindset about approaching the internet is like I think a lot of people, when they're doing research for figuring out how to do something in business, whether that's marketing or sales or design on a website or whatever, they'll go and like read blog posts and go research it a bunch.
Right.
The way I use the internet and the way I go about things, like I constantly create it. Like I'm constantly saving stuff that I think is valuable. So like a swipe file, and I'm constantly like reverse engineering processes. So when I'm on Facebook, I have companies that I follow solely so I can see their Facebook ads, save their ads, and then use them later in whatever I'm doing. And I think, I mean, using the internet as a way to reverse engineer processes of all these different businesses is hugely valuable. So, like when you're on Facebook or when you're looking for the next thing to do, just go directly to the source of someone who's doing it successfully, and then copy what they're doing, sign up for their sales funnel, save their graphics and learn how to recreate similar things or study the principles of their graphics rather than just reading about it.
So right now we're getting to the last couple questions of the show here. And these last 2 specifically, the first one I'm going to ask is it's what advice would you have for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out of college to become an entrepreneur? They haven't taken that step yet. And the last one is advice for those that have taken that step pretty much. And so you're free to, you can share just a few sentences or teach a little bit more, but basically just trying to target, because those are the 2 kinds of listeners that I will have here on the show, is those that are thinking, like, should I drop out? And they're listening to this, or those that have already, and they're on that entrepreneurship journey and just looking for more, encouragement or inspiration or advice. So
for the first group, for people who are considering dropping out, my short answer is to drop out. If you are unhappy in school, if you are unhappy with the standard menu of options that are available to you now, then you should go try something different. I don't really see a point in debating it much further than that. But so if you think you can be happier and more successful by quitting school, then do it. You can always go back. The risk is pretty low for taking a year off of school. You can always go back and try something different. You're young. You have plenty of time. But don't feel like you need to finish school right now just because you're this age. Like, it's totally fine to try something different. A couple pieces of practical advice. One, I would just say get rid of the myth of entrepreneurship a little bit. I think it can be a bit of a buzzword. Now, I know like I can point to you and I can say, Kylan, you're an entrepreneur, and I know that. But at the same time, I think for people who aren't entrepreneurs yet, or who haven't done a whole lot in the real world or in business, it can be sort of a high barrier to entry, because you think of entrepreneurs as these sort of like magical beings who are creating these huge companies. The reality is, like, if you want to start a business, great, just go start a business. If you want to go work for someone, that's fine too. If you want to travel, wonderful. Like, you don't need to just start out dropping out. You don't need to necessarily go be an entrepreneur, or even, to go into business, you don't need to be an entrepreneur. You can just go, get a great job for yourself as well. That's totally fine. Point 2 is you don't need a solid plan for everything. So, like, when I dropped out, I had no idea that I was going to end up working for Praxis. No idea that like the majority of my clients that I would ever end up working with, I had no idea that I would work in the commercial real estate industry for a bit. So you don't need a solid plan for everything. And I think a lot of people, they'll say like, if you drop out, you need to have like a definitive, plan for the next 10 years or something stupid like that, which is absolutely not true at all. You'll learn a lot of stuff on the way. And I know it seems scary if you have no clue what you're going to do, but that's honestly, that's the way I did it. And I think that's the way most people that I know do it. 3 is get an apprenticeship if you can. So find somewhere where you can work and where you're sort of the work experience is optimized for learning, not income. So if you have a great job that you can work at for free or for cheap, but you're able to work or you're able to learn a lot on the job, then I would say go for that. And 6 months of that, a year of that will be hugely valuable and will just set you up for success afterwards. If you're in school now, whatever you do, if you are on the fence about continuing school or if you want to go start a business later on, avoid student debt. Nothing can limit your future options more. Now, there are ways if you have student debt to go succeed anyway, but starting a business is significantly harder if you have $50,000 to $100,000 in student debt than if you don't have any. So if your goal is to go really be an entrepreneur, try to avoid student debt if at all possible. 5, this is kind of a thing that you can do. And I think even if you're in school, you should start this now, is build a personal website, start creating content, start establishing yourself as an authority in something. So write podcasts, create videos, document what you're doing in your daily life. It will pay off huge. It was one of the biggest, like I said earlier, it's been one of the biggest things in my own personal success. And it has just led to so many different opportunities that I recommend it to everybody now. It's like, just create a website, have a place online that if I Google you, I'll be able to see what you're about and what you've created. And so that really speaks to just in general, taking control of your digital brand and leaving a digital paper trail of things that you've created and things that you're interested in along the way.
What's the best way that we can connect with you? And you also mentioned that you might have some resources for us.
Yeah. So I have a personal website. It's derekmagill.com. DerekMagill. You can go to the personal website, and on the homepage is where you can download the ebook. It's not easy to miss. It's right there up front. And then you can connect with me on my contact page. You can shoot me an email at derek@discoverpraxis.com. And then also, so if you go to derekmagill.com/successful dropout, I'm going to have a bunch of links to some FAQs that I've done for college dropouts, which will sort of dive deeper into a lot of the questions that your listeners might have about dropping out of school, a lot more practical advice and things like that I think they'll find valuable.
Perfect. So derekmagill.com/successful dropout. Don't forget to check that out. Successful Dropouts, you've been hanging out with Derek and Kylan, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed as an entrepreneur. For everything we talked about today, his website, everything, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Derek into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish. For more information about how to drop out, grind, and succeed, go to successfuldropout.com. I also love questions. If you have a question about anything we talked about today, I want to hear from you. Go to successfuldropout.com and click the Ask Me a Question link at the top of the page. Coming up next week on the show, we have Brett Fox, a very successful dropout who is absolutely living the dream at the age of 27. He has some incredible and just crazy stories to tell. Don't miss it.